Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about using Power BI to get data from SharePoint lists and how to do it really quickly. If you've tried to pull data from SharePoint lists with the old SharePoint connector, you may also have experienced that frustration with how slow it is. I've been wanting to make this video for quite a few months now, and two big things have changed since then. One is the introduction of Dataverse for Teams, and so going forward, I know I personally will probably store a lot of stuff there that I would have put into SharePoint lists, so you may need this less often. And two, they've come out with the V2 version of the SharePoint list connector, which is way faster than the version 1, and we'll talk about that. But I still wanted to make this video because I really want to show people how to use the REST API to pull data from the SharePoint list. It's still faster than V2, and it has some added flexibility when it comes to things like having person or lookup columns to really go after all of the data in those other lists. If you like these videos, please follow me on Twitter at MahoneyPA and subscribe to this Hoosier BI YouTube channel to see the latest videos we put out. All right, so to do this demo, I made a big list in SharePoint. I used Flow to make this list to just auto-populated it. It's got 15,000 items, and it's got a couple of text columns. It's got a choice column. It's got a person column. I wanted to have that in the demo so you can see when I hover over. Since this is my dev environment, I'm the only user in there, so it's all me. And I also made a lookup column to another SharePoint list, this one here, just this little one here that has 3 lookup values and a project field and a project status, just to demonstrate here. So, if you're going to connect to a SharePoint list, I'm going to go ahead and copy this, go back to Power BI. We'll do get data. It's not on the default list, and we're just going to do the SharePoint list connector. And choose that one. And with this one, it takes as an input the list name, the site name. So what I copied is the full link to the list. So I need to back up here to just the site level. My site was called main. If I had a sub-site, for example, submain, I would write it like this, but I don't have that, so it's just main. And you'll see 3 options here, and I'm going to do this first one here. This is the old one with the slow one, and in the query, I'll show you that I've already set up one using 2. And if you do choose the number 2, the more recent connector, you have 2 options here to either get all of the columns from the SharePoint list, or this is a nice feature. You can just get the default ones just the columns in the default view. So you could actually modify your SharePoint list to include only the columns you want, make that the default, and then specifically pull just those columns with this connector. Okay, so I'll show you that. But I'm going to use the classic connector here first, just to show you that. And I've already made a bunch of other queries, and so we won't go through this each time. This is just to remind you of how to use the connector. So I called my list big list, and I'm going to go ahead and transform data. And we'll go through these other queries in a minute, but you see you get this one here. This brings back, all of the columns there, many of which are auto-generated within the behind the scenes in SharePoint. But you can see like there's our choice column as text. Good thing to know is this one here called field values as text, where it actually has all of your fields in there as just as text values, so it makes it real easy to just pull them out. So many times I'll just right click here, remove other columns, and then just expand all the data I need from there, and that sometimes can be faster. It certainly can be simpler. And then you can also get to your person and lookup columns here. So those are available to expand to go get the other information. And so I can see all the people data about me, that those would be options. If I hit this expand, those would all be options for me to get email address and manager name and all that kind of stuff. Similarly, for the lookup column, you can do that as well. And remember, I had project and project status, and I think that would the main thing. The lookup value was in the title field, so I might grab that as well. But I'm not going to do that because I don't recommend you use the V1 connector anymore, mostly because it's very slow. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I actually had pre-built this one before and tried to load it, and this particular list, 15,000 items with a lookup column and a person column, it took about an hour to load, so ridiculously slow. Don't use V1. So if I had made the other option selection there, and so I've made queries using the default view and the all view, so those other two options I showed, so these are both using the V2 connectors. Both of these are very fast. They are about the same speed, so I thought the default view might be faster. It isn't, but they're both way faster, and I'll show you, well, refresh on all these to show you a comparison of what I'm going to recommend you do versus these to see how fast it is. But with these, you can, again, it pulls back your data for like the person and lookup columns in list form. And in the case of, and hopefully you know this trick, if you click to the right of these things that show up as hyperlinks, don't click on them because then you'll drill into them. If you click to the right, you can get a preview. And if I click on this one, this was an item I had deleted, so I needed to refresh this preview. But it's a record there, and it comes across like a list of records, so it's something I can expand, and that's what I do in the next step. This lookup column one comes up as a preview, and it's just a single record, so I don't have the option to, it's a single item list, so I don't have the option to expand it, and so you actually have to do a little bit of M code to pull the value out. But if I expand the person column, I see these records here, and if I expand this, I have some useful information here. I've got the title one, which would be my name. I've got the email and picture, but I don't have all those other options that I used to have in the V1, where I could pull any of those, people, person related details. Similarly, for the lookup column, I had to add a custom column here, and since this is a single item list, all I did was take the lookup column and grab the first, Power Query starts counting at 0, so I just put this in curly brackets 0 to say, give me the first item out of that list, and it's a single item list of a record, so I get the record, and from there I could expand the values as well. And this one, again, didn't have all the data. In fact, it only had the lookup value itself. It didn't have the other two columns in that lookup list that I showed you, the project and the project status, right? So if I need those things, while this V2 connector is very fast, it doesn't allow me to get all of the related info that I needed, or at least I haven't figured that out yet. I also played with, I wanted to check if the V2 connector folds back to the SharePoint, so that if you had, say I only needed 5,000 of these rows instead of 15,000, if I could filter this on, say, choice A of the choice column, which should be a third of the results, would it be even faster? And in my simple experiment, it wasn't faster. So and the fact that, when I get to that step here, like the view native query is grayed out, so which if it wasn't grayed out, it would say that it definitely is folding. When it isn't, when it is grayed out, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not folding, but it suggests that. All right. So the reason I want to make this video is to talk about using the web connector. So if I go back to the other page here, and also want to go to this is not new info. This has been out there with SharePoint lists for a long time. SharePoint lists have a REST API, and there's some good documentation out there on the Microsoft site. There's plenty of other blog articles about how to use the REST API, and so I'm just showing you in the context and providing what may be a useful function to you going forward, so you don't have to figure all this out, but you can still benefit from it. And so basically we're going to use this one here that has this kind of syntax where you put in the site and you give the name of the list, and you can make very specific calls to get the data you need. So I'm going to show you how I did that. And basically, this is that same syntax that I just showed you, and basically you would use this and replace everything inside these brackets here with your info. And so this is what it would look like for a completed site. And so again, this is the one I'm showing you in this demo today. This is the tenant name. This is the name of the site, main, and then this is the list, and inside these single quotes, big list. When you do it in Power BI, the default would be to return data in XML format. I prefer JSON, and so you can specify in your web call to send it back to you in JSON. So this is what a typical source step would look like to go ahead and bring back all the data in JSON format for this list on this site. And I'm going to show you that and give you a function that makes it easier for you. And so it's the space URL, and then at the end there's this items, which says actually want the data. If you replace items with item count, you can actually go and get the count of items, and so that can be useful because as it turns out, there's a limit of 5,000 per web call, and so if you need to get that a list of 15,000, you're going to be stuck. But there's a way to use item count to go out and say, hey, I have 15,000 items, and then there's some other things you can do with a skip token and pagination to go get your data in 5,000 item chunks and therefore have it all. And so that's what I'm going to show you. The nice thing about using this as well is you've got this URL to go get the data through items here, but if you add this question mark, you can then use these other OData kind of things to, one, you can use, $top to restrict the number of rows returned, like I just want the first 1,000. This is a little bit error prone with this SharePoint List REST API. It depends on which columns you filter on, whether they're indexed or not, but you can also filter. You can put a filter term in there and again, push that work, basically fold it back to the source, push that work back to SharePoint to only send you the rows you want and speed things up. You can select the columns that you want to bring back, and I'll show you that. And then if you have sort of nested columns that have, like person lookup columns, you can use the expand function to pre-expand those and get back the data you need. Okay, so I'm going to show you all this. And so, this is what one typical call might look like. And in this case, I only want 2,000, so I don't need to worry about pagination since it's less than 5,000. And I just want these specific columns, for example, but we're going to do a little more sophisticated than that. So if we go back to the transform data side, this is just what like a single web call would look like. So if I go to my source step, and this is kind of like I showed you in the other page where I just got the web call to go out and get those 2,000, just these columns. I specify that I want a JSON response, and it comes back as a list. Again, you can preview that. It's a list of records, right? We can drill into that. We can convert that to a table, and then we can expand those columns, and boom, I've got my data. Okay, and this is a real simple one, so we're not doing any expand. So you notice the person and lookup columns are not here. Okay, and so what I've done is I've made what I hope is an M query that people can adapt to more quickly get to their SharePoint list data very fast and with full flexibility. And I'll just kind of walk through it here. And I have it both in sort of M code format that I'll share in the link, a link to it below the video. And I also have it in a function format, which may be more convenient for folks. But basically, it puts these things up front for you to define, what's the name of your site, what's the name of your list. You can hard code in your tenant name. In my case, this is my dev URL here. In the function, you can actually just type in your tenant string there. And it basically concatenates all those things together and auto-generates the string that you need. It goes a little further, and it actually first makes a call out there to say, hey, how many things are in this list? And then it basically creates a list of numbers incrementing by 5,000 based on the number that it gets back. And then for each of those, it basically goes out and skips that many records and gets the next 5,000, and the next row gets the next 5,000, etc., so that you end up getting all of your results. And then depending on what types of fields you have, I've got 3 versions of this field select variable in here, and only one of them should be active at any given time. So you can, comment this one out, for example, and then, uncomment out this one, just to specify. If you just want everything, use this top one. If you want to specify the columns that you want, but you don't have any person or lookup columns, you can use this one in the middle, or the most advanced one is here, where you can pick your columns and then also pick the lookup and person columns and the sort of the subfields that you want to be able to get all those in one call. And that, that's basically, how it works. I'm just going to discard those. But, so basically, this one goes out, makes the call. It says, okay, there's 15,000 items, right? Okay, so that means I need 3, I need 0, 5,000, and 10,000, because when I add, this last one will get me from 10,000 to 15,000, and therefore get me all my data. Convert to table, and then this field select one here is where it actually it makes that final URL that it's going to use for each row, and then this one goes out and actually takes the value for the skip and uses it in the web call to say, hey, okay, this time go out and get the 5,000 records starting at 0, and then this time go out and get the 5,000 records starting at 5,000. Etc. And so if you have a much longer list, this would just expand based on the item count. Okay, so this is the example of sort of the most advanced one here, but this one uses that same approach. The field select here, I've put in, again, you have to understand the syntax, but I've gone ahead and for the lookup column, I've grabbed the lookup, the title, the project, and the project status, and then for the person, I've gone ahead and grabbed my last name and first name and email address. And the key part of it here is you use the syntax to say which things to expand, the sort of the sub things you want, but then you have to add this term here and do the ampersand expand, and then I'm expanding the lookup column and the person column. And when I do that, then I basically get everything back, and I'll just jump to the end here and show you that I'm able to pull, all those things there. So I've got last name, first name, email. I've got the lookup value itself, which is in the title thing of the SharePoint list, the project status, as well as the other pieces of data originally from my list, the title from the original list, the choice column, the date column, etc. Okay. And so, if this looks useful to you, I also have this available as just a function, so you can just copy this function into your query editor and then put in your tenant string there, the name of your site, and again, if it was a subsite, you would put that there, for example, and then the name of the list, and then you can invoke the function and it goes off, and then you're off to the races, and boom, I've got all the data here that I'm interested in to pull out there. Okay, and again, you'd have to in the function here, it doesn't auto expand those columns, so you'd still have to play with this part to go ahead and expand the columns of interest if you have person or lookup columns. And so I'm going to just go ahead. I don't think I've changed those. Delete this invokes function so it doesn't load. And I'm going to close the query editor here just to show you the relative speed of these. And so I'm going to just go ahead and refresh, and all I've enabled load on is the V2 with all columns, the V2 connector with the default view, and then the expand one that gets all the data. And so when I hit refresh, you're going to see I have parallel loading enabled, so you're going to see all three of them refreshing, and you'll see how fast it is to get 15,000 records. And so this is the one using the web connector and the custom URL, and you can see when it hits 15,000, it's done ahead of the other two, so it is faster. But the V2 connector, not knowing how to write these URL strings, are still very fast, right, and way faster than the V1 connector. So again, I'll post a link to the code there, either the mQuery or the function version of it, so that if you need to, again, get to your SharePoint list data in a much faster way with more flexibility, those will be helpful to you. And again, if you like the video, please follow me on Twitter and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.